Welcome to Akasha Talks, a podcast on consciousness, healing, and different ways to interact and weave those together, both old and new, to be able to get the most out of your life. I'm your host, Lance Baker, coming to you from Newcastle, Australia. Hope you kick back, relax, and enjoy the show. Welcome, Brett Cameron.
Thank you, Lance Baker.
How are you? We've talked about this for a long time.
We have.
Being the closest hypnotherapist to me, 2 blocks away, we catch up for beers every now and then. Yeah. And I think it would have been a year ago at least now that we had a beer, and I said, "You've got to come on the show."
Yeah.
But you'd been busy writing your fantastic book. But we're not here to talk about the story of that book here today. We're here to talk about stories.
Well, we're not here going to talk about Fully Booked. All right, later.
We'll talk about the book later. What I'm really interested in, and what I know my listeners are going to be interested in, is your story and your ability to tell stories. And
right.
I'd like you to tell me again about what got you interested in storytelling.
Storytelling, where do you start with that? Funny story. Well, I think it's a funny story. We've just had renovations done at home, and we've moved a lot of furniture around and unpacked and packed our bookshelf, and found this book, which is called Journeys. And if you go to page 27 of this book, it's a story called something like On a Foggy, Foggy Morning, written by Brett Cameron, age 7, Australia. And I'm thinking, hey, I was published at the age of 7. So this was a book, an American guy put together a book from English-speaking countries of storytelling. And I pulled the book out, and I'm just reading through some of these amazing stories which were written by, from say, ages of 5 through to about 10, and kids with brilliant imaginations. And I think that maybe even back then, I just had the love of telling stories. And even now, when I know that I'll be starting to tell my wife something, and she'll say, "Is this the short or the long version?" All right, okay. So I know that it depends on who my audience is. So I have to tailor that. But I just love the power of storytelling, and even in the work that we do as therapists and hypnotherapists, we're always weaving stories in to lift people's imagination, or to open people's imagination to the possibility of change. And this has been going on since time immemorial, probably even before that, where people have been telling stories, and people sitting around campfires telling stories, or children about to go to bed of a night and someone reading them a bedtime story. And it's just allowing the dream to just open up and to explore possibilities. So I think is that the short or the long version of what I need to tell you?
That's the short version. That's how you got into a writing of a story. And now where you've taken that with your life, of getting into storytelling over that personal ability of tapping into the story of somebody's consciousness in that hypnotherapy approach. How did you get into this interesting field that we live in?
It's interesting. How did I get into this field? Well, okay, so here am I. All these kids running around screaming. It must be beach time.
They're living their story.
They are living their story.
Beautiful story in this beautiful beach.
So here am I entering into I'm in my 60th year now, so about to hit a big milestone this new year. And over that period of time, so I think if I go back to my first working years, was in the sales industry, similar to you, loving dealing with people, talking with people, communicating with people, which is all about, building that rapport with someone, being able to have a conversation with someone, and to get into that person's model of the world. And I think it was such a strong foundation I think having that background, but also being free to be able to talk with people. So I spent a lot of time in sales industry, sales and marketing and so forth. I got into hypnosis. If someone told me at my 40th birthday that in 4 years' time you're going to be a hypnotherapist, I would have said, well, what do they do? I had no idea. What do they do? But so long story short, and it's a sad tale, but also a tale of growth. And that was my first wife, bless her soul. She was a graphic designer, and I was working corporate in sales, and we got married and we're on a honeymoon in Italy, and she's noticed that her legs aren't all that good, and we're saying, look, maybe you're just tired. We've really packed a lot of things into the last month. And when we got back, she decided, look, my legs aren't good, and she had a couple of falls and went and had some medical tests done, and had the diagnosis of motor neurone disease, or for people in the Northern Hemisphere, it's ALS. And I can still recall the specialist, the neurosurgeon, saying, I'll give you 2 years. And we're saying, 2 years what? And he said, well, 2 years life expectancy. I thought, hang on, that wasn't in the equation. And it's almost like just driving into that wall, the wall of life, and realizing, wow, what do you do now? Well, Cynthia went on a journey of healing, and she tried every modality known to man, as in she was looking at knowing that there was no medical intervention that could help MND, and still none today. And so she discovered Reiki, had a lot of benefit with Reiki, kinesiology, massage, hypnosis. And that tweaked something in her mind. And so she said, you know what? I'm going to study hypnosis. So she resigned from her work doing graphic design and studied hypnosis. And I still have images of her sitting in a wheelchair hypnotizing people. I thought, how cool is that? As in, she was determined she was going to beat this disease through the power of the mind. And she lived for 9.5 years. So she certainly wasn't going to do this 2-year diagnosis or death sentence. So she pushed it out to 9.5 years. And as I was observing her along the way, and she was physically getting more debilitated, and I realized that I also had to make a decision. I had to step off the corporate tiger, because I was on a plane a couple of times a week, flying around the country and meetings and so forth. And I realized I had to spend more time with her. So I resigned, and we were living in Sydney at the time. And I set up a business doing business coaching. And so I studied NLP. And then I studied hypnotherapy, as in, once I was introduced to hypnotherapy, I went, wow, this is fantastic. But I also studied Reiki. So I did level 2 Reiki, and I did a massage course, and some kinesiology, and did a lot of energy work. And I was also on a journey of discovery as well. And that journey, of course, wanting to help Cynthia to heal, but it was also helping me to heal as well. And I think that most people enter a healing modality, and the first person they're really healing is themselves. And I think that's pretty well your story too, isn't it, Lance?
It certainly is, yes. Most people I know of in the healing industry, that's it. There's a few that see it as an idea of a way to make money, and they soon find out it's not. You've got to have the two key ingredients is passion and compassion, and that's partly why I wanted you to tell that story and start going down that road, is because that is where you got into this.
You do. I mean, without compassion, what are you doing here? Seriously, what are you doing? And that's the thing, when I talk to people within our profession who are really successful, I know that the key, well, you talked about compassion and passion, but I also throw in there integrity.
Certainly.
And it's almost like that's the thing that underpins their success, because they have that ability to connect with other human beings at a genuine level. There's no grabbing a book off the shelf and saying, this is what we're going to do today. You're really dealing with that person. And I think that sort of goes back to why I'm now having my Fridays as a self-care day, because I like to think that I'm passionate, I'm dedicated, I'm focused with all of those clients. And if I'm seeing 5 or 6 clients a day, sometimes 7, I'm a crazy man, but if I'm seeing those clients every day, I like to be there 100%. I like to be present with that person to honour their story. Because every client who walks in, they have a story to tell as well.
Exactly.
So it's about honouring their story, and even though sometimes I will suggest to someone that the answer isn't in the story, as in sometimes it's the story that's got you trapped where you are now.
Yes.
So sometimes we have to be able to step out of that and almost look at that as if, that's the story that's happened. But wouldn't it be great if we can now create a new story moving forward? And that's where we're opening the imagination for change.
That's it. It's where magic is story.
Yeah.
And we're nothing but the stories we tell ourselves. And it takes that moment in hypnosis of where you tap into that subconscious part that's telling that story to give it a new book, to give it a new story. And it makes my day when I see somebody pick up a new book or realize they've got a book there that is an amazing story, and they're trying to read somebody else's
story.
It just doesn't work when they're in the wrong story. So story is everything to me. What do you tell yourself when you wake up in the morning? What do you tell yourself when you go to bed? What do you tell yourself when you're on your honeymoon and you get that news that your life is going to be different? Well, I'm not going to take Dr. Idiot's story of 2 years. I'm going to take the 9-year story of hope and live my life.
And I think that's the key to whether you choose to live in the past and stick to the old story, which, as you said, may not be your story. It could be someone else's story. I remember a client who was seeing me a few years ago was telling me all of these war traumas. And these war traumas were from World War II. And he's telling me about all these things that happened and how it's affecting him on a daily basis. And I looked at him and I looked at his paperwork and said, mate, you're only 45. You weren't even born then. He went, yeah. I said, so whose stories are they? He said, my mother's. I'm thinking, so why are you living them? And it was almost like he had this light bulb moment that someone was giving him permission that you can now choose a new story. You don't have to live that one anymore. It's not helping you. So why don't you choose your own story? And that's something that we have an opportunity every day of doing that. Every day is a new day. You wake up, think, all right, I'm still here. This is good. What story am I going to live today? Or what story am I going to tell myself today?
Yeah. And it's powerful. If I wake up on the wrong side of the bed and start telling myself a silly story that's not mine, it's made up, or that it's just not helpful to look at, it can spiral out of control quite quickly. But the moment I notice that, and I snap back in and ask myself what story I'm telling myself, or what's the value in that story that I have been telling myself, and do something about it to create the new story, change it very quickly.
Or what can you learn from that story?
Yeah.
So I'm all about life lessons. So therefore, a story happened. So what have you learned from that? if you haven't learned from it, well, maybe you have to look at it from a different perspective, or maybe even let that story go. Yeah, so I like to use analogies and metaphor when I'm working with clients, and one of the key metaphors I use, perhaps too much, but it's very effective in a first session. It's a library metaphor, where you allow, well, firstly getting someone into a lovely hypnotic trance, for lack of a better word, but into a beautiful space where they are more receptive for change, or being open to listening to a story, and inviting them to go into the library of their mind. There are books on the left, which might represent all the negative things that have happened in their life, and there's books on the right, which are all the positive things. There is one particular book that I want you to find, and that book contains all the things that you want to get rid of, all the things that are holding you back. It could be someone else's story, it might be old traumas, it might be something you've imagined that may or may not be true, but you've held onto it long enough that there's a part of you thinks it is true. So I want you to find that book, and just allowing their beautiful unconscious mind to go on a search, to imagine they can find a book that contains everything that they want to get rid of. And once they've got it, they let me know, and say, right, now I invite them to go into another room. And there's nothing in that room except for an incinerator. And there's a fire inside it. You can feel the warmth coming from that fire. And you're holding this book. Now that book might be light or heavy, it might be large or small. I don't know what color it is, but it's a book. And it contains stuff. That's the technical word, stuff. And I'm inviting you now to get rid of it. Imagine you have the power now just to get rid of it, to burn it out of your life forever. It no longer serves a purpose. And it's amazing how many times when we're using that metaphor, and you can see the facial expression on someone's face just change. They might have tears running down the face, and they might feel a bit contorted, or maybe even a relief. As if, wow, I can actually get rid of that stuff. And it's almost as like at the end of that session, you see a change in their physical stature, where they're almost standing taller, and they're lighter, their energy is lighter. And that's only because they have given themselves permission to say, I don't need that anymore. And of course, then I'll start to work on empowerment from there, giving them the power to create their new story, whatever that story is. And and you mentioned the word hope earlier, and I think that is the key, where I think our role is to give people hope. Hope that no matter what it is that they've come in to see you for, hope that things can be different. We can either stick where you are, or we can make changes. What do you want to do? And it's just opening up the possibility that people can change, and it's beautiful to be part of that. And as we've often talked about, there are times when a client leaves and you just sit there going, God, I love the work we do. And it's just, you think, this is good.
Yeah, especially when you see that evolve more. Like what you pointed out, that most therapists have had to go through a healing themselves. I think it's that light bulb moment of when they realize they can change stories.
Yeah.
And then they realize, I hold a valuable thing right now. I know I can help people change stories because I just changed mine. And that's a big burden to bear, because now
massive.
You're inspired. Because when you see somebody reading the wrong story, you want to be able to show them there's a different story.
Yeah.
So you want to learn the tools to share that gift and to get out there and tell those other stories.
Yeah, something just, it's a little bit off track, but it's still part of a story. When I was in a group and deciding whether I was going to write my book or not, whether I was going to become an author, whether I was going to be a digital marketer, where am I going to take my story? And I remember my coach, Maggie Wild, she was we did a process which was really to find if there's any emotional blockages. And I started tearing up. I was getting really emotional. Thought, wow, where did this come from? And what came out was this clear message: I'm not my father. I thought, where the hell did that come from? And in a way, somewhere in the deep recesses of my mind, I was holding on to a notion that since my father had he'd failed at quite a few things in life, and maybe I was thinking, I'm just going to be like him. And I had to realise that, no, that's his story. And this is my story. And I was able to separate myself from that to realise that, thanks, Dad. I know you gave it a go. Didn't go the way you planned, but this is my path now. And to realise this is my story. And I think we all go through those little sort of epiphanies where you think, what happened then? Where did that come from?
It's beautiful when you get that moment of realising it. And so many people do that. When we're growing up, we've got mum and dad or some parental figure there that gives us the blueprint of life by showing us how they do it. And you see their limitations. Your consciousness goes, okay, well, there's the cap. And it's understandable. If you go back a few hundred years, we were living in small communities. And if you stepped outside of the barriers of the limitations of what was acceptable of status within your community, well, you're on your own. And you couldn't survive on your own. Now things are a hell of a lot different. You can find a new community quite quickly that fits, that's appropriate for the life that you can see. And so you can step out of that story quite easily. And it's great. And you wrote that new chapter of your life, of writing that book. I remember it was a fair few years ago now. I remember it was not too long ago after I'd moved to the Merewether office, and I was doing a flyer drop. So it was a long time ago because I haven't done a flyer drop. I was walking around this neighborhood, and I was listening to Joe Rogan's podcast, and he had some guest on. I've got no idea who this guy was, so I can't give credit to the name of it. But he was talking about his idea with story was that he treats life like he's in a movie. And he asked himself that question of, okay, well, if this is a movie right now, what would the main character be doing to move the plot forward?
Oh, I like that.
Am I doing that, or am I making a boring movie?
Yeah.
And he would see what you'd write if you're a script writer, and he'd go, can I actually do that? I can. And he'd do it. He goes, sometimes there'd need to be a re-edit. But most of the time, life got really interesting because you work out, well, where do you need to go? Where do you change that story so you're not just living that same story? And you had your practice that you developed slowly over the years after being inspired by trying to connect and be influenced by Cynthia, to going out and having a full-time practice for over a decade, well over a decade, to being fully booked, as the book's called, to realizing, well, you've got gifts there that other people need. And part of your story now is not just one-on-one connecting with people, but helping people organize their holistic business a little bit.
Seriously too, because the story, it's always growing, it's always changing. And I know that when Cynthia died, I was living out of Newcastle. I was living up the north coast, just north of Coffs Harbour, and so I think I went into my cave for a few months and licking my wounds and wondering, where the hell do I go from here? And I remember deciding that I was going to come back to Newcastle, and my mum was living in Newcastle at the time, and she had cancer. I thought, it's probably good to spend a bit of time with her. And I remember having a coffee not far from here at the junction one morning, and a lady pulls up in a BMW four-wheel drive, gets out with a four-wheel drive pram, and dressed to the hilt. I'm thinking, that's my demographic. As far as if I was to come back to Newcastle, that's my target market. And the crazy story was that night, I was having dinner with some friends at a pub nearby, and at a table across from there was my now wife. And one of those moments when your eyes lock for 1 second longer than it's normal. You think, hang on, what was in that? And obviously a few years later, well, no, it wasn't even a few years later, but a couple of years later, we were married, and I'm now living about 50 metres from that cafe where I saw that four-wheel drive, and I thought, life is beautiful. Yeah, it just creates something where I know that I had to go through that cycle where I was the carer for Cynthia while I was still seeing clients, but I think I was also building my reservoir of compassion so that I could relate to so many other people who need healing in whatever that capacity is. And then when I was ready to come out of that cave, it's almost like, okay, I've got all the tools now. Well, I think we're still gathering tools, as we always will. But I think to come out of that cave and think, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to make this happen. Let's do this. And it's all about resilience. And that, I think, is the key. Where we talk about hope, but I think we also have to help people to realize that they have an inner resilience. Now, people have different thresholds, I suppose, but it's about building that threshold. And your experience with threshold of pain and being able to break through that. And that's physical pain, but some people have just emotional pain or mental pain or whatever that is.
I had all of it with that.
You had it all. You got the jackpot.
Certainly had to develop some resilience.
Yeah.
But that I now see as a gift. Like it taught me resilience. I know from going through that, I can go through anything. I can face whatever challenges. And going through that, I know I can help anybody through any challenge because it's a big hurdle.
Yeah. And with stories, a couple of key stories that I like to weave into my sessions, particularly with resilience. I like to tell a story about an Australian soldier. His name is Curtis McGrath, and he had the misfortune of stepping on a landmine in Afghanistan. Lost his legs, and he was the team medic in his troop, and he was still conscious while he's advising his buddies how to administer morphine to him while recognizing he doesn't have any legs. And in the ambulance on the way to the field hospital, he's still conscious, and he said to his mate, "You're going to see me on the podium at the Paralympics in Rio." Now we fast forward, and Curtis McGrath won gold for Australia in the K2 kayak at Rio Olympics. And I'm thinking, how amazing is that? Here's a guy who has just lost his legs, and in that moment, he's not going, "Oh, woe is me." He's thinking about the future. He has already started to write a new story about what his future is going to be. And now he has prosthetic legs, and he's a very successful motivational speaker on the circuit. But I thought, hearing that story, I just think, that's beautiful. It's this human hope that, okay, what now? What can I do now? I might move forward. Like Cynthia, she was a graphic designer. All right, she's now in a wheelchair. What can I do? I'm going to help people. That's what I'm going to do. Okay, so it's almost, it's this beautiful moment of knowing that, right, life goes on, and I'm going to make something of this.
It's beautiful.
It's a lovely
Beautiful,
story.
and
And
it's a powerful story. He could have chose to just grieve the future he'd lost of having legs, but he chose to embrace a future of a different challenge.
And he just took it head on, and I think it's a lovely.
I have to look up his story deeper.
Yeah,
it's inspiring.
Honestly, it's a lovely story, and I think that I like to read stories about not only human survival but how people have grown out of situations. And when you hear of the survivors of World War II concentration camps and so forth, you think, wow, that's amazing. Or my neighbours, they've got a shop on the corner there from Cambodia, and when they talk about their family escaping Cambodia from the Pol Pot regime and so forth. The traumas that people have gone through, and then to land in a new country where they don't speak the language, they don't have any skills, but they have something in here that says, it's almost like every morning you get out of bed, you look at your feet, what direction are they facing? Forward. That's where I'm going today, I'm going forward. Yes. If they're facing the other way, well, you do have a problem, but it's about saying, right, that's where I'm going today. I'm moving forward and looking at what opportunities are there for human growth. And it's I'm just loving reading about and hearing people's tales and what they've actually gone through and seeing them come out the other side.
It's extremely powerful, and it's humbling to see where people's stories have been and to see how they can embrace it, sometimes so easily and eagerly, sometimes reluctantly, with great help.
Yeah, of course. I'm just thinking when we're talking about human growth and so forth, I've always had a love of reading literature, and one of my favourites is an Australian author, Peter Carey. And I think one of the first books that I read as a young adult, I suppose, was Bliss, which I think might have been his first book. And I really resonated with the character. This character, his name is Harry Joy. And I think for some time I sort of used Harry Joy as a bit of a pseudonym, or an alter ego. And the story of Harry Joy was, he was an advertising executive, had a successful business, and he died. Had a heart attack. He was floating up through the trees. And the ambos came, and he's watching all of this. And then they've revived him. Bang, back down into his body. He came back. But he came back a different person. And he realised all the sinful things that he's been doing in his life. He saw the fact that he was representing a company that sold petrochemicals that had all of these carcinogens in them. Sacked them. He found out that his partner was having an affair with his wife. All right, got rid of that. He found out all these evil things, and he went on a quest. And Harry left the city, went up into the rainforest, and lived in this hippie commune. And he fell in love with this lady by the name of Honey Barbara. And she was called Honey Barbara because she was a beekeeper. And she would collect all the honey and go to the local town and sell the honey to provide money to the hippie commune. And Harry fell in love with Honey Barbara, but she was pushing him back. And Harry realised the way to her heart was he was going to plant trees. So Harry Joy planted trees, and he planted trees with a zest for life. He was forever planting trees, and she would be calling out from the veranda, "I know you're out there, you mad bastard." And he would be quiet, planting trees. And 7 years later, there was a drought. All of the hives were almost decimated. There was no blossom around. But 7 years was enough for the trees that Harry planted to start to flower. And the bees sent the love letter to Honey Barbara, and she got it. And I thought, what a lovely story. And yeah, I sometimes tell that story to clients who have fallen out of love and they're dead. Oh my God, woe is me. I'm thinking, you know what? Love comes at a time when you least expect it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to plant seeds. And you have no idea what's going to grow. But what if those seeds grew and then sent the love letter to whoever you were chasing there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you didn't know the seed you planted when you did that first NLP class was going to lead to the life you live today.
No idea whether. I mean, really, it was like going down the rabbit hole. Yeah, the Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole. We're not going to talk about Alice in Wonderland. I love that story. But yeah, it's like just being sucked down that rabbit hole and opening up that inquiring mind.
And that one seed now has sown so many others for other people. We're connecting with thousands of people over the years for therapy to open up new blossoming trees in their life.
And that's something that we've talked about, is the joy of doing that. Instead of one for one, it's one for many.
Yeah.
To be able to, if you can educate and help many, many people grow, wow, this is just going to have exponential growth.
It does. I love being in my clinic and connecting one-on-one with somebody and being in that moment and giving them that new zest for life and a new pathway forward and helping them connect to their hopes, their dreams, their goals. But I can only see so many. I've only got so much time in the day. My calendar's chocked out. I'm getting stories of people that they want that change. I'm like, I want to give that to you today, but I can't fit you in for weeks. So I make time in my day to teach, share, and give the gifts.
I love that.
Because that means, well, now there's an extra person and another person and another person and another person who can see them today, tomorrow, the next day. And it's not competition. Well, you're 2 blocks from my office. If we're in a business model, you're the closest competitor, and we've never seen each other as competitors. Great? We always catch up for a beer. We're colleagues, like we're in the same company, but we're not the same company. We just have different approaches of helping people, and because of that, we're both flourished and thrived, and it hasn't been a competition. And that's the way I see it when I train people, is I can share gifts with them. And on that, we've avoided talking about it. I'll let you give your book a plug, because it is helpful for that, because so many people, I was lucky when I started my business. I used to work in management and sales, and I'd done a business class and everything to know how to organize a business. So when I stepped into this weird industry, I was able to adapt and survive through what it takes to put that out there. But most people, when they approach this, like what you said, they've come from a healing place. They don't have the skills of knowing how to run a business and how to have that resilience to move forward through all the different stages, to connect to the right people, to become fully booked. So you put your skills into practice and wrote that out there in a nice, clear, simple, easy, direct way. Would you like to tell us about that in case somebody listening at home has some sort of holistic practice and wants to be fully booked?
Thank you for that lovely segue, Lance. I appreciate it. But quick story behind Fully Booked. And Fully Booked, which is a book that I've recently released. It's on Amazon, so if you just did a search on Amazon, wherever you are in the world.
Link will be in the show notes.
So if you just go to Amazon and search Fully Booked, and you'll see this mug on an orange and black and white cover. And so Fully Booked, I've been passionate for many, many years about helping people to heal. But I'm also passionate about helping other practitioners to be better at what they do. It's amazing how many workshops and conferences I'll go to, and you talk to another therapist or practitioner who is about to give up. They're really passionate about what they do, but they know nothing about advertising, marketing, admin, just doing the business stuff. And therefore they're ready to put up the white flag, and it's so frustrating. And I thought, it's time that I wrote a book. And the whole idea of Fully Booked is, as you said, I wanted it to be easy to follow, so it's for either novice practitioners in whatever modality you're in, or maybe someone who's established and who has just hit a brick wall and they're wondering, well, what the hell can I do to grow my business? And even last week, I had a client. He's just opened up a business as a mechanic. He saw my book. He said, "I want that. I need it." And I'm thinking, okay, because it does go across many different businesses. So it's really to help you to firstly discover who you are, not who you thought you were, but who you really are, and then looking at who your client base is. Who's your client avatar? Your perfect client avatar. Who do you really want to attract to your business? And what are you doing to attract them? Or what can you do to attract them? Then we look at creating business plans and marketing plans and financial plans, which are the foundation of any successful business. Then we start to explore marketing, digital marketing, online. print even. And then looking at things that are stopping you, things that are preventing you from growing. And then at the end we look at self-care. So we're really bringing the whole thing together. And I think that anyone who just wants to know a little bit more about how they can grow, either personally or in the business, go and buy it. Fully booked. Plug over. Thank you, Lance. Thank you.
It's all right. It's a valuable tool out there for a lot of people. So thanks for
I think
putting
everyone
the
wants
effort
to have
into
a fully booked practice, whatever that means, to be fully booked.
Yeah.
Whether it's, hey, if you're working 3 days a week or 1 day or 5 days, as long as you know that you are now working to your capacity, which then pushes you to grow in different areas as well. Because I'm always wanting clients to push back on me so I can grow. I don't want to be average.
No, not at all.
No.
Thank you for sharing your stories with us here today. It's always wonderful to hear a beautiful story, and your story of healing and what you've been through has been amazing. I want to ask for one extra thing for the show notes, if I can. The 7-year-old story. Could I have a copy to put online for this that the people can read at home of that first story?
I think I might have to send you a scan of that page.
Fantastic. That'll be in the show notes as well, people.
Right.
Enjoy. Thank you, Brett Cameron.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Keep well. All the best. And that's a COVID-friendly handshake.
Oh yeah, we sanitised first. We sanitised first. I hope you enjoyed listening in on that chat with Brett as much as I enjoyed sharing that time with him and having that discourse. I love a good story. And it was even more special to be able to do it face to face, to be able to get outdoors and spend some actual time with somebody for this, rather than just doing these talks on Zoom. I've got to do it face to face, and even more important than that, we've got to do it at the beautiful beach that's right near our offices, so we can get to share time in that fantastic environment. Now, because of that, I understand the sound wasn't perfect outside of a sterile environment. There's a few extra little bits here and there that weren't perfect, but I think I did a fairly good job cleaning it up. So it took a bit longer to clean that up than what I normally spend, which made this episode a little bit later than it could have been. But the main reason this episode has had such a big weight that's been even more extended of my regular poor schedule for putting these episodes out is because I got invited to do a talk for the 8th Annual Zurich Hypnosis Convention. Now with this, it's online this year rather than in person due to COVID, obviously. But since it's online, I thought I'd go all out. I figured I'd make something special. And not just for the hypnotherapists that are normally the people that are attending that conference. I've got a free pass for any of you to be able to go to the conference. So I figured I'll make something for everybody. So I've spent the past couple of weeks making a very special class. A self-hypnosis class. Fully inclusive. From beginning to end. And not just the usual kind of self-hypnosis most people think of, where they record some sort of audio, plug their headphones in and listen to themselves talk. There's no trance. It's a way to have clear communication with your subconscious. Two-way conversation where you get feedback, where you get that understanding of whether this part of your consciousness is going to help or not. If this part of your consciousness knows what you're asking and is prepared to help you make that change in your life. So I spent a lot of time sitting down here recording it. I've spent a lot of time at my desk here editing it to dial it down to fit it in. I had an hour slot and I made it an hour to the second. I had to edit it down to make sure it fit within that time. I've crammed as much as I can in.
And with this, I guide you through how to do it. I set up ways to be able to introduce you to different parts of your consciousness, a part that can make your life happier and more exciting, filled with more love and joy. I teach you how to connect with your inner child. And if you're a hypnotherapist, since it was a convention for hypnotherapists, I also teach people how to connect to the hypnotherapist inside. But if you've got some other career you're interested in, or you're involved in, you can just replace the word hypnotist and hypnosis with whatever it is you do, accounting, accountant, so on and so forth. Adapt it for you, and you'll be able to make use of that as well. There's some energetic aspects. If you've been listening to this show, you probably know how passionate I am about energy, so I teach some energy aspects to be able to heal these different parts of your consciousness and become your own best, unique, wonderful self. So this is free to catch my talk, plus I think there are up to 7 or 8 extra talks you can do for free off my link. There's about 70, 80 presenters now, so there's a lot to pick from. You can pay to upgrade to see all of them, but you can just go and catch these. Now this I think goes live on the 29th of October, but you can access this all the way through to the 28th of Feb 2021. So you've got plenty of time to catch this and use this link. If you're listening late, don't worry, it's there. Check it out. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for putting up with the big gap in between episodes, and I encourage you to get out there and check out the Hypnosis Conference and my talk on self-hypnosis. Thanks.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode and perhaps learned something new. If you did, I'd love for you to subscribe or drop a review on whatever favorite podcast you have, or if you've been enjoying the video versions on YouTube or Facebook, do it there.